We are live. There is no joke from Pete Rollick. He's off
There
his
is.
he's off his game today. What's wrong with you? Besides
You know
old
why Peter
age.
Pan always flies?
Huh?
You know why Peter Pan always flies?
Why?
He never lands.
Oh man.
I love that joke. It never gets old.
Oh God. Okay, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Today is March the 1st, 2020. Damn that February 29th. That screwed me up on something that I won't get into. Livia, too. She was tweeting about it. Livia Llewellyn. I don't know what it was, uh, but
February 29th should be like a purge day. There are no laws on the 29th.
I shouldn't be too angry because, Ben, as you know, that's Superman's birthday,
It is actually, yes.
February 29th. Yeah. So, um, all right. Our guest today is, please forgive me and say your name so that it's said correctly.
You can just call me Yen, then.
Yen?
That's enough.
Okay,
Yen.
Yen Pedersen.
Correct.
Uh, we'll get back to you in a second, Yen, but you sent me a couple of documents, and I forwarded it to everybody. Um, you wrote a book called Balanced Wonder,
Correct.
and this book is going to be next to impossible for anybody to buy. But I'd like to talk about it because it's very interesting. Um, Here's the summary of the book. In Balanced Wonder, Experiential Sources of Imagination, Virtue, and Human Flourishing, Yen Pedersen digs deep into the alluring topic of wonder and argues in a scholarly yet accessible way that the experience of wonder, when balanced, serves as a strong contributor to human flourishing. And you've also written articles on Lovecraft. It looks like you may have gone to school. You have a PhD in philosophy, an MA in philosophy, a BA in philosophy, and a BA in nursing science. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. It is true.
That's great.
For a person who absolutely hated school when he was a kid, I suppose that's quite an achievement. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, why don't we do intros? And we have a new panelist here today. So let's start with Melissa Walsh. So
Guys.
give us like 30 to 60 second. Who are you? And I know you listen to the show. You don't in your commute usually.
Yes. So I am first off a fan. I'm a fan of the show. I'm a fan of H.P. Lovecraft. I've been like a big fan of just Lovecraft and weird fiction for almost my whole life. I actually used to do a paper zine called Cthulhu Palooza back in the late 90s, early 2000s, with fan fiction by myself and just like some other collaborators. I have a website where I review weird fiction. And that's about it about me.
Okay.
So I'm really excited to be on the show, talking with other people that are also into the same kind of books as I am.
If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
Oh my God.
I would be an oak tree because they're very like regal and beautiful, and they're also nuts. They're a little crazy.
Wasn't a serious question.
I'm just wondering what kind of tree Pete Rollick would be now. So you're next.
Probably.
You can introduce yourself.
For me,
Yes,
I
you.
would be a strangler fig because I'm a parasite that sucks the life out of everybody who comes near me.
That's awesome. Do you write books also?
I apparently do write crappy books.
What do you mean?
What?
Why are you saying crappy?
Oh, no, I mean, did I say crappy? I mean, lovely books that
Okay.
people read.
Good.
And
You know, before I go on, this is hopefully turning into less of a panel, if you know what I mean, and more of a virtual friends sitting around the table um, discussing these things,
oh,
having fun discussing these things. And with a new victim each week, usually, like Jen. So, Yen, I'm sorry. Um, who's next? Ben, why don't you introduce yourself since you can't be here the entire time?
I'm Ben Handelman. I am the technical support for the show today. So
That's true.
just in fact doing some technical things right now that hopefully will make the show really awesome in a few minutes.
It's not awesome now, I guess, but all right. Rich,
Hi, I'm Rich. I'm just a bearded guy with a library who's a Lovecraft eZine fanboy.
God, I love that background. Bridget,
Hello, I'm Bridget Brynmark. I'm a composer and an artist. I make music boxes of the macabre and a big Lovecraft fan as well.
yeah, I'm gonna post the link to that sometime this week on the message board and on the Facebook page. But that Lovecraftian music box is really great, and you've got it up for sale now. So
Yes, and there's more to come. I rewatched Dagon last week, and now I'm going to be making the best Dagon music box.
okay, you got inspired.
I did.
You just said the best Dagon music box.
I did.
Well, the best and only
The
Dagon.
best. I was gonna say, and only.
Yeah.
Yes, the best and only.
Okay, well, I think that's everybody. I'm kidding, Sean.
You missed
I'm
me.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Poor Sean.
I know. I missed two of you, but I'm just having a joke at Sean's expense. Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Hamill. I also have a beard in a library, although mine doesn't look as nice as Rich's. I am a novelist. My first novel, Cosmology of Monsters, came out last September. It's, you can find it at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all those booky type places.
B. Dalton? Is it at B. Dalton?
If B. Dalton still exists, then
You can
yes,
find
it's
one.
there.
And it's on Amazon. And Stephen
Yeah.
King loved it. So
Yeah.
I know he's too humble to say that each time, but I'll say it for him.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Rick.
Rick Lay, master of useless trivia.
Oh no, it's very
It's
useful.
not useless.
It's very useful.
Yeah,
Oh, in life, it's not very useful.
it's
Yeah.
useful for geeks like us.
I can say several people have mentioned that the only reason they watch the show is because of Rick. So
What?
throw that out there. Hey,
He's
Leslie
a
Klinger was one of them.
No, I thought it was because of Pete.
No. It's because of Rick. Actually, people used to watch the show just for Joe, because he was their favorite character.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
we lost our star.
All right, you're all fired.
Wait, you can't fire us. We don't get paid.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the prize. I'll find it later. Matt's sick, so he's not here. And I'll find it later when I have
You
a
know how many
chance.
times I've done this show sick?
I know. I know.
From my bed.
I'm sick right now. I'm just coming off of a bad flu. So,
You had the flu after strep?
yeah.
Oh,
I'm not
goodness.
sure what it was, but I was in bed for 3 days straight. So,
Cool.
so anyway, I do real quick before we get to Yen. I have a sale. I have it linked in the show notes below. It says it's going to end March 7th, but I'll probably extend it. And it's helping the Davis family and the Lovecraft eZine, and you're getting a lot of Kindle books for very cheap prices. So check that out if you're interested in that. And I also just want to say before I forget that I think a lot of listeners and or viewers don't know that I do list on the Lovecraft eZine website the upcoming guests. If you go to lovecraftezine.com, the top left, click podcast, then you'll see the latest video cast at the top, some more stuff, and then just scroll down just a little bit, and you'll see who's coming up and when. And if a change happens, I get to it pretty quickly, so it's accurate 100% of the time until I find out differently. All right, so Yen, will you tell us a bit about yourself and let's talk about your book?
Oh, sure. All right. Yeah, so I'm a philosopher, I suppose, of sorts. And I work during the daytime, at least, in a small college here in Copenhagen, in Denmark. So yeah, you can say by day I'm a low-flying academic. By night, I write funny things about H.P. Lovecraft and the things I really enjoy. And in this sense, weird fiction is something I have been, working with one way or another since I was a kid. And these days, I'm just trying to combine it with one of the other aspects of life that I really enjoy, which is philosophy. And when I say enjoy, it's because philosophy is something you do. It's not just something you read. It's a bit of both. So yeah, that's sort of the short version of it.
Okay. I'm not sure we have access. Let's start then with your Lovecraft articles. I'm not sure that we have access to them or not, but can you just tell us a little bit about a couple of them and your, why you wrote them?
Right. Yeah. So let me see. I think it started back I was living in the UK for many years. That's also where I did the most of my studies on wonder. And once those studies were sort of finished, there was a bit of a vacuum for me. And I like normally when I don't know what to do, I just begin to read Lovecraft because I enjoy it massively. And then I think at some point my wife lost her temper with me and said, "Look, why don't you do something?"
Yeah, you mentioned on the video test that she kind of pushed it toward all this.
Try to combine the two things or something, And I thought, well, is that really possible? And and then I sort of rediscovered many of the stories that I initially, to put it bluntly, absolutely hated about Lovecraft, and it was, it's how should I put it? The first story I ever read was The Case of Charles Dexter Ward,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to say which story is my favorite, but that is definitely one of the best ones in my opinion. Why is that, you may ask? Well, it appealed to a very young man who didn't know what to do with his life. And I think the idea that you can discover something in your past that has a certain bearing on your future life, not that I'm envying Charles Dexter Ward as such,
Right.
but it was the idea that there was more to the obvious that was really appealing.
Just a side note on that, Yen, and maybe you know this, the BBC recently did a audio drama of Charles Dexter Ward, updated to the present day like a podcast, but it's very, very good.
Right. I haven't listened to that, I must confess, but I'll keep that in mind.
Don't you think, guys? I don't think I've heard anyone say it wasn't good.
It's gotten really good reviews.
Yeah.
I've heard all good things about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, go on.
Yeah. So naturally, following the Charles Dexter Ward experience, I was trying to hunt down new Lovecraft stories, and at the time I didn't really read English, so I was stuck with the very few Danish translations you could find. And the next story I read was The White Ship, and I just didn't comprehend it. It was just really odd and really weird, and I just thought, what is this? I mean, I was big into Stephen King and all the horror books at the time, and I just thought that was just too weird for someone like me. But I mean, the beginning of The White Ship is thoroughly engaging, in my opinion, and those stories Lovecraft wrote, I call them wonder stories. They were sort of the next big thing in my adult life. I sort of rediscovered what he was actually trying to do with these stories of wonder or fancy or stories of the imagination, you can call them. And those are the ones I'm kind of focusing on today in my writing.
Good, because one of the main reasons I asked you on the show is reading the synopsis of the book, which again is titled "Balanced Wonder." Um, I think it's easy for a lot of adults to lose their sense of wonder. You know, uh, I mean, for example, water has been flowing out of faucets, since before my grandparents. But it's still, I turn it on, clean water comes out. That's kind of amazing. Or I'm out walking my dog at night and I look up at the stars and one of the stars is moving because it's a plane. And I think that little dot way up there right now, there are people sleeping, reading, playing games on their phone, whatever. There's a keeping a sense of wonder, I think, is really important. And then in the video test, you and I started to discuss, and we cut it off because we wanted to talk about it here. And I'm sure you can put it much better than I can, but the sense of wonder that Carl Sagan had, um, but at the same time balanced with evidence, you know, as opposed to the sense of wonder in cosmic horror, where what you discover you wish you hadn't. So
Sure. Yeah. That's definitely one of the things you can focus on. I mean, Carl Sagan is such a prototype of wonder in a sense.
yeah,
That his life and the way he lived and the way he communicated with, the public is I mean, that's very admirable. But to have that sense of wonder that he perhaps had. I mean, I never had the honor of meeting him, but you can argue that nobody walks around in a constant sense of wonder. It's that would be probably compromise your skills of adaptation, in the sense that you simply can't afford it. You won't survive. On the other hand, life without wonder will become rather flatlined, I would say. It's you could even begin to ask whether it's a life worth living. I won't be the judge of that, but it's definitely a question you should ask yourself. And I would say, I think there's a part of my book that speaks about this. There are enemies of wonder. There are elements of our everyday life that will take you away from this sense of wonder. So, for example, if you are unfortunate enough to live a very tough life, imprisoned, say in a concentration camp or something, it's hard to say, oh, look at the blue sky, isn't it wonderful? It's if you are bereft of the necessities of life for a human being, then me coming around speaking of a sense of wonder, that would just be ridiculous. So it will be better to upgrade you a little and get you out of the camp and get you something to eat and all these vital things for human beings. Then we can talk about elevating our consciousness to what's on the dark side of the moon and all these kind of things that scientists ask themselves, or just curious people like all of us. So that's definitely that's an aspect worth exploring. And another aspect of our modern life is the busyness. Think about it. When you have some free time, what do? You quickly fill it up with some kind of work, because we are geared towards production. We are valued if we produce things, and work is very important for most people on the globe. But that also has a price. And the price is that it takes us away from the wonder of everyday life, as you put it before.
Yeah,
I mean,
Thoreau, I'm not going to be able to quote this directly, but Thoreau said something, one of his many quotes, that he would stand in the doorway of his house and for hours and just, look at things. And, he saw it as it wasn't a time wasted, it was a time in which his spirit grew.
Yeah, You can definitely argue pro that, because it will be how should I put it, a close attention to detail. So, like, if I were to sit here and stare at the wallpaper, what am I doing? Am I wasting my time, or am I actually exploring not just the wallpaper, but also my inner world and my ability to observe things around me? And do I notice? Do I care for the details? And you can begin to explore yourself as a creature of perception. I mean, how many details do you miss about reality, the reality you are situated in? How much bias do you have? How much do you project out into the external world? Because you also have to take into consideration that you don't have a one-to-one relationship with reality. You are kind of locked into that strange brain of yours, and looking out through those two wonderful eyes you have in your forehead, or not in your forehead, but in the sort of middle of your head, yeah. And that is a window of sorts. And is it dark? Is it clear? Is it illuminated? What, all these kind of things you can begin to ask yourself, and that will definitely propel you into a sense of wonder. But for most people, it will also be greatly disturbing, because it takes you out of the immediate culture of
Right.
the everyday.
Well, even in Thoreau's time, he saw people exactly the same way, as always keeping themselves busy.
Yeah.
Finding
Yeah.
more work to do.
Yeah,
So Lovecraft, what's your thoughts on this as it ties into wonder? He had this sense of wonder about the universe and what he did with it.
Absolutely. And I think before we get to the sort of more cosmic part, I think we should start with him as a being, a human being growing up under the conditions that he grew up under. And most of us know that he had a tremendous sense of loss, and when the family fortunes sort of diminished, and but at the same time he was very gifted in terms of reading and writing and being able to cite all sorts of people from the books that he was reading at a very early age. And he had a very rich sense of reality, because of his imagination was, how should I put it, put to use quite frequently.
Right.
Also because of the books he read. And I happen to have, I'm going to show you here. This is Hawthorne's A Wonder Book that I know Lovecraft read. And I like to think that this was actually the edition he read. I'm not entirely sure. It's an old one. I got shit from your lovely country at some point. And having, being exposed to, old myths like this book is about, is to expose yourself to wonders. That's not me who invented that one. That was Aristotle, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who is famous for saying that when we dive into myths, we are diving into the wondrous, and it generates in us a sense of wonder as well. Today we can wonder about the space, and the fact that we are situated on a tiny spaceship Earth, if you will, and it's not like we are looking up into the heavens. We are sort of bang in the middle of it, and it's really strange to contemplate.
There was putting things in perspective, the small spaceship that we're on. Scientists recently discovered an explosion in space, almost I don't remember how far away it was, quite a ways. But the explosion was so vast that you could put 15 Milky Way galaxies lined up together, and the Milky Way galaxy is 100 light years across. So,
which I can't even comprehend.
Yes,
it's beyond me, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So it's the vastness of things here. But I'll tell you something, I can put a little add-on to the wonder of it all, to realize that you are part of something grand and vast, or unfathomable in a sense. That's one thing. Another aspect is that you're here to actually being able to contemplate it. Now that's something entirely different. And if you weren't here, the universe wouldn't be complete. There would be an element missing. And
yeah, Carl Sagan said that we were, in essence, the universe being
precisely.
able to think about itself.
Yeah, and that's a very wondrous thing to say, I think. And I think you would find many of these things in Lovecraft's stories as well. I mean, I'm thinking here about Curanis, I think his name is. One of the yeah, precisely. And all those dreamers and sort of, we can call them romantics. I like to call them romantics anyway, because they resemble many of the thoughts you will find in the romantic movement. When you have
philosopher kings, right?
Yes, yeah, precisely. So when you think about, where did Lovecraft get his ideas from in terms of these dreamers and seekers, and well, he got them from his own personal life, of course, because I think he was, what can I say here? Well, some people say philosophy begins in wonder. That's Plato and Aristotle. That's great. You can also say that philosophy begins in disappointment. And I'm not really sure which one is right. I kind of struggle with it. I like to say it's the wonder thing because that's what I'm studying, but the disappointment argument is pretty damn good. There are many things I think most of us are very disappointed about. And then from that disappointment, we are trying to figure out what to do. And I also think Lovecraft must have gone through immense disappointments in his life. And also,
yeah, what's the saying? A cynic is a failed idealist.
Yeah, precisely. But he tries. He tries to do something about it. And I think his Dreamland stories is his attempt to try to find some solace in the pain that he was going through at the time. And I suppose it stayed with him until the end.
That's an interesting take. And you said something interesting to me about Lovecraft yesterday as well, that you considered Lovecraft to be a romantic. Speaking of the sense of wonder. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's because there are many of the things he writes that has a close resemblance to, say, some of the writings that Poe did. We all know this. But also, some of the romantic poets, like Keats, for example. Many of the things he laments are like the progress of science. That you are in effect, with the scientific progress, you are emptying the world of deities. There's nothing mysterious left. Everything is explained. It's a bit like when we explained away the rainbow. In Greek mythology, the rainbow is Iris. It's the messenger of the gods. And when you see a rainbow in the sky, and if you're Wordsworth, then your heart leaps up and you're kind of like, wow, you see something totally magnificent, which it propels you into a larger world. And for Lovecraft, I think he, in some of his poetry, at least, Fact and Fancy, if you've ever read that, there is a lamentation of the philosopher who tries to turn every stone and explain to you how the world works. And I know this was written when he was fairly young, but there is a longing there present for something more than just what the scientist can tell you there is. And that particular feeling is, to my mind at least, very romantic.
Mm-hmm. Of course, a scientist with a sense of wonder would tell you that there are so many mysterious things left yet to discover in the universe that you don't have to lose that sense.
No. Absolutely. I totally agree. There's so much dark stuff, and many of we don't know that much, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
So there's enough to dive into as such. It just takes a lot. If you want to be an astrophysicist, you want to be a chemist, you want to be a medical doctor, or what have you, all these things are hard to master these days. It was
Let's remember that Lovecraft himself was a sort of failed scientist.
true,
He
and
wasn't
a good
an
chemist.
astronomer, right? He wrote amateur astronomy journals and did some chemistry as well.
Yeah.
Precisely.
So he has sort of this sort of self-training.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're right. I think it leads him to the sense of wonder about the universe.
But also his own place in it. You know, what am I to do with the time that is given to me? You know, what am I? What is my existence? You know, what does it mean to be me, H.P. Lovecraft? And what do I do? And that has always, I mean, that leads into what I started off by saying, the sort of the meaning of your life, in a sense. I don't think Lovecraft, at least to my knowledge, ever asked that question as such. It was just he propelled himself forward with his writing. But some of it is escapist writing, I think. Some of it is him just training his writing skills and putting crazy ideas out and just exploring them. And personally, I find that really interesting to read. But I think that in the writing process, there is a certain escapism as well, in Lovecraft in particular, that we can explore. And that's why I would still claim that he although he has his eyes at the sky, he is still a romantic, a bit like, what's his name, Percy Shelley, who was very much into science, at the same time a fine poet.
Okay, before we get to the cosmicism, does anybody else want to jump in? Questions for Ian?
Well, I just want to state, I
Melissa.
honestly do not think that he would like to be called a romanticist, but I agree with you, because I know he's like very materialistic and doesn't believe in any greater thing. But I do agree, because I think all his dreamland stories, especially one of my favorite, was it the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath? Like, there is such a sense of wonder in those stories, and I think a lot of the Dreamland stories don't get as much attention, as it's more like horrific, like cosmic horror tales. But there really is like a major sense of wonder and just like almost like a purity that he let himself explore. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing to kind of delve into and talk to. And I do think that astronomy, probably his love of astronomy really did kind of like fuel that sense of wonder, because who doesn't look up at the stars and think
Absolutely.
wow, what else is out there? I mean, it's just an amazing sense of the vastness of the world that can be both horrific, when you think about it, because it makes you feel so minuscule, but at the same time it's just wondrous, wow, there's so much out there beyond myself. So not really a question, just wanted to add on to what you were saying. I mean, and I agree with you.
No, I totally agree. And I definitely think his interest in astronomy, but also chemistry, in the smallest things, the things we cannot see, when, you can argue that eternity is something that, it goes forward, but you can also argue that it goes inwards. You could look through a microscope and you will see things you couldn't even imagine before exist. But how long does the world go the other way, through the microscope and inwards, in a sense, if I can explain it like that. That is equally wonderful. And Lovecraft, to my knowledge at least, dive into all these things. Of course, it propels you forward in a very particular way. I think, if you look at his Randolph Carter stories, Randolph Carter being an alter ego of H.P. Lovecraft.
Definitely.
I think that's the most telling of all his work. And it always returns to his childhood. It's in a sense a paradise lost franchise of with the Dreamlands, and to me that sort of exploration of yourself as H.P. Lovecraft is, in a sense, very romantic. Also, at the same time, I would love to comment on something you said. How can he have this sense of vastness of space and cosmicism at the same time being romantic? I have an explanation for that, but you will have to wait until the autumn because I'm writing about it at the moment.
Ooh, okay.
Well, we'll have to have you back on then.
Yeah, you will have to. But I can tell you that there will be an article coming out from Vrije University in the Netherlands this summer. It's going to be free for everyone, so you can pick it up. And it's online,
you mean, or print,
yes,
or
online,
both?
Online. And
please let me know when that comes out, and I'll share it.
I shall. It's called Weird Fiction: A Catalyst for Wonder, and it was.
Oh wow!
It was. I
want to read this now. You're not done with it though. That's a great title.
It was a speech I gave at a conference in Holland or the Netherlands last year, and there is I have a concept called dark wonder, and I'm pushing that as Lovecraft being an exponent of precisely that. So it's not wonder as in like we perhaps most understand it, but there is a, how should I put it, there's a shade to it. There is a dark side to it. There's a dark side of the coin included in this particular wonderment. So how should I explain this? Imagine a circle with a sort of falling split in it. So at, say, one side you have wonder, on the other side you have horror, and then you go around the clock to, say, 5 minutes to wonder. You have dark wonder, in a sense.
You know, so what you just said is the main reason that I love to read weird fiction. You know, of course, I think all of us would consider Lovecraftian fiction as a subset of weird fiction. But, yeah, because you're looking for that wonder. You don't know what's going to happen.
Precisely.
And you may not ever know.
Mike, this is very similar to when you talk about Dracula. I always use Dracula as this sort of example of, yes, it's a horror story, but in the aftermath, for the characters, it's sort of this sudden realization that they've experienced God. Because Dracula proves the existence of God. Because he fears the cross. So it's sort of, this is kind of what you're talking about, that within, yes, it's a horror story, but there are implications to horror stories. There are implications to there being werewolves and vampires and everything. It opens up the world to some darkly wondrous things.
Yeah, if this is possible, what else is possible type of thinking.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to just double, or endorse what Jan said. I will say that the phrase "dark wonder" was the before I even knew what weird fiction was. When I first started reading Lovecraft and working on cosmology and monsters, like "dark wonder" was the exact phrase that I was using, and I think that makes perfect sense because most of Lovecraft's fiction, like the plot, is really just a gradual unveiling of an image, or a particular sight or sensation, rather than what happens to whoever. It's more like, what did this narrator see? What did So I think that's such a wonderful way to put it. I just wanted to chime in on that.
And isn't that interesting that Sean? Because I mean, for years, the problem that we had that critics had with Lovecraft is that nothing happened.
Right.
It was all atmosphere.
Right.
And it just, and now
and that's what makes it special. Yeah.
Exactly. Rick,
And Rick has a comment. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. First, I'd like to compliment you on your article in Lovecraft Annual number 12.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's see that cover.
oh, it's
Thank
the same
you.
cover.
They all look the same. They're just
Oh, do
different
they?
colors.
All right.
And that was on Lovecraft as a romanticist on the night side. You talked about Lovecraft being influenced by a poem by John Keats, Lamia.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
It's more, it's the flow of it. And oh gosh, I'll have to dig it out. I have my own copy here. Let's just bear with me for a second. But while I'm desperately trying to find it here.
No worries.
Well, I was going to say it's about a woman who can turn into a snake. And from a different angle, I wondered if it influenced Psycho Pompus's poem about a werewolf allied with a snake woman. But you approach it from a totally different perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, I must admit the Lamia. I was mostly interested in comparing the way Lovecraft composed his poem, Fact and Fancy, to that particular way that Keats put it. And what struck me, I'll try to read out some of Keats's words here because they're very interesting. It says in the beginning, "Do not all charms fly at the mere touch of cold philosophy? There was an awful rainbow once in the heaven. We know her woof, her texture she is given in the dull catalogue of common things." And that ennui or boredom and flatness of life that comes out in these words is to me quintessential romantic. If you push to Lovecraft's Fact and Fancy, it starts off with the following: "How dull the wretch whose philosophic mind disdains the pleasures of fantastic kind, whose prosy thoughts the joys of life excludes, and wreck the solace of the poet's mood." It is precisely the same kind of way of taking a swing at the person who describes life and is not really alive. And for me, that was what struck me when I first read Lovecraft's work, that it reminded me of something I've read before. And Keats, yes, but also Edgar Allan Poe, who has a similar piece, which you obviously know since you have my article.
R.H.
But with the Lamia,
R.H. Barlow and Lovecraft wrote a story called The Night Ocean, which I'm sure you all know. But it reminds me of one of the things that the protagonist writes. "For I have always been a seeker and a dreamer and a ponderer on seeking and dreaming." So, yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that this sense of wonder, when you get clues about what's going on, but you don't know what's going on, and you realize that you will probably never know, as in The Night Ocean, the story of the Willows, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of examples. You guys could probably think of some too. Soren Narnia, he's a guy I know who runs a very, very good horror podcast called Knife Point Horror. I told him about a very short incident something that happened to my wife and I some years ago. I've told it too many times here, so I won't bore you with it. But it takes 2 or 3 minutes to tell. And he's like, that's weird fiction because it boils down to this happened, and that's all I know.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, that sense of wonder just grows from that.
I think, I mean, the sense of wonder can grow from many things, from just, ordinary observations, like we discussed before, like everyday things. I mean, I can operate a computer, but I have no idea how it actually works. You know, I turn on the tab and clean water comes out, but I have no idea actually how it's purified and how all these things work. I can read about it, I can learn about it, yeah, but there are so many aspects of life that I simply don't know anything about. Um, and our experiences at the same time are also quite strange. I mean, I you should tell your story, and I can comment on, or alternatively, I can tell you a story from my own life that was at the time extremely strange and haunted me for a long time. So, with your permission, I shall do that.
Please do.
So it was during the years of I lived in Durham in the northeast of England. That's where I did most of my wonder studies at the university. And of course, when you study, I lived there with my family. Life is hard. You don't have enough money. All these things, stress all around. It takes forever, and you're right. And I was sitting in Starbucks. That was mainly my office. They kindly let me sit there and study while I was devouring their nice coffee. And then one day, late afternoon, I had enough. My brain's fried, and I just want to go home. So I went out, and what I haven't told you that prior to that time, say 5 years before, I lost a very good friend to cancer, and her death was kind of, for me, quite troublesome. We've been friends forever, and she was only 35 and had married and just got a kid, and then you die of cancer. It's like, where's the meaning in that? It's what can you possibly say? And life goes on. I move to England. I get out of Starbucks 4 PM, and there she is, right in front of me.
Really?
Clear as day, just like you chaps and ladies now. And I'm kind of like, okay.
What time of the day was this, and then what happened next?
4 o'clock in the afternoon,
Okay.
and I'm not used to see dead people walking, and she
Right.
was not supposed to be there, and it was completely illogical. And was I stressed? Was I dehydrated? What is it, And I had all sorts of excuses, and in the end, I'm kind of like, but she was just standing there, looking at me. And so I took the scientific approach and say, well, let's try to communicate with the thing, and see what is going on. And as I approach, she vanishes into thin air, just like in any other ghost story,
Right.
And I say to myself, well, you're working too hard, you're stressed, go home, get some sleep. And then the next day, I see her again.
Wow.
When I walk into town. And this became like an everyday event for the next 6-7 months, more or less.
Wow, seriously.
I see her every day, just a face in the crowd, and all of a sudden this person turns around and there she is, and then she disappears again.
How did that make you feel? Was it disconcerting as well as joyful, or?
I was never frightened, or it wasn't a scary thing, or like I didn't feel like I was haunted. It was just extremely engaging and very interesting, and it just became a part of my everyday life until I got glasses, and then she disappeared.
Wow.
Why? Because my eyesight was fading rapidly. I can't distinguish people who are, say, 12 meters away from me. Everything is blurry. So my go-to explanation is that I project things that are on my mind out on the external world, and there's the ghost. Now that's wonderful, the ability of the mind to do that. I mean, how many times have you not woken up in the middle of the night and seen things in the room that wasn't there? It's just a fabrication of your own.
I really like what you just said, that there's a sense of wonder either way, either explanation, that the mind can do that.
Yeah. I mean, so I sometimes I put this before my own students, and to put it bluntly, most people either turn their heads in denial or completely freak out. But no, you don't have a one-to-one relationship with the external world. You don't, and you're a subject locked into that strange organism of yours. You perceive things, but do you perceive clearly? Or are you looking through the world through a dark glass, or glass darkly? I think that's how it's phrased in the
Yes.
Bible.
And I think
But
it's also okay to say at times, I don't know,
yeah,
instead of making up an
precisely,
answer.
precisely. Pushing on to the romantic movement, again, like people who came after Immanuel Kant, who is the person in the history of philosophy who's sort of dividing the world into two, as in the world in itself and then the world for you or for me or for us. Some of the romantics would claim, well, there is no such distinction. When I perceive the world, that's how the world is, because my imaginary powers is the only thing I have, and thus I create the world. That to me is an extreme epistemology, if you will. I don't subscribe to it myself, but it is definitely this creative thing, or this creative movement in the romantics. That's definitely an element that Lovecraft wrestles with. But again, I won't tell you more about it. You have to wait until the fall.
All right, you tell me when it comes out, and I'll get you back on.
All right.
I want to open this up. Who else would like to comment or ask?
Didn't you want to go into cosmicism?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Should I start or?
Yeah, go for it.
Well,
All right.
since you're the guest, I guess we'll let you talk.
Oh, you're kind. So maybe we should specify a little cosmicism as in, like, we all know it, or should we attach some kind of challenge to it? And
define it so we all can agree on what we're working on.
I think that's a good way forward. Cosmicism. Well, in terms of Lovecraft, I think the best way I can sort of describe it is that, well, you're here as a part of the universe, but don't think there's anyone who cares for you out there.
Works.
Yep.
Works.
Yep.
That works.
Yeah. So it's a bit like being a ring bearer. You carry the burden of this knowledge alone, and then you also have to deal with it somehow. I suppose philosophy can spring from that. Lovecraft definitely developed his own method to cope with it, but he wasn't blind to it. It's not like he was running away from it. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Lovecraft, is that how the hell can you cope with this kind of recognition of how the world is, and then go on living? That's amazing. That inspires me in a sense.
I think part of the answer, quite honestly, feel free to disagree, that I think a small percentage of humanity really think of it in those terms. Certainly anyone who, and I'm not disparaging anyone who thinks differently, is part of a religion or has a belief system like that, they're not thinking this. So they don't have to, as you said, be the ring bearer of this knowledge.
And if you don't mind if I jump in real quick, because I'm about to head out. But
sure.
In my experience as someone with a faith and discussing with people who do not, most just never consider this question.
Yeah.
It never enters their mind. If you ask them, they'd be like, oh, well, no, I don't. I just believe, Big Bang, evolution, etc. There's no guiding force, or maybe there is, but we can never be sure. But they don't actually think about it in the way that H.P. Lovecraft is, that if there is anything that created the universe that doesn't care about you, that if nothing created the universe, then certainly nothing cares about you. I think this just isn't a question. It's just like if you talk to a Christian and they're like, I don't know how you could be atheist, and they'll rant. And it's like, well, that's because you're not an atheist. Most atheists don't ever even think about this. It's not a daily issue to them. It's, they're more worried about like paying their bills or taking their spouse out to dinner. Like, it's just this kind of level of thinking, I think, is it's something that's like a very specific group of people would do. And I'm not saying a group of it does. You don't have to be smart to do it. You don't have to be a scientist or a philosopher or a psychiatrist. But I think there's only a specific group that actually would, sits down and does it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would buy that. Yeah. It's and people react to it in different ways. Lovecraft was absolutely convinced of the futility of human existence.
And unfortunately, there are people that come to that same conclusion. And, there have been, unfortunate ends from that line of thinking.
Yeah.
For certain people with mental illness and such.
And the interesting thing, Ben, is that some people, they have this sudden sense of freedom from that knowledge.
Yes. And I do think it's always one thing I see a lot from different people is there's always this idea that, well, if you're not thinking about these things, that you're not really smart or you're not. And it's like, no. The world around us is so busy and complex. I completely understand why no one considers any of these questions on a regular basis. And I, I just want to make that for myself clear that, like, I completely understand if someone goes, I don't really care if some cosmic being created us or not. I don't care about any of that. All I care about is the life I have right now. That is a completely,
that's a valid response. Yeah, that works for them.
Exactly.
And it's not for us, who do think about these things, to look down on those who don't.
Exactly, because I do see a lot of teenagers that are Lovecraft fans and such who, oh, well, if you're not thinking this way, then clearly you're an idiot or something. It's like, no. Like, that's not what this is. Quite the opposite may be true. It's just we all have different priorities. We think about things in different ways, and it is important to recognize that.
Yeah, thanks.
I think you should perhaps also add to it that, if you walk around and you are young and you claim, gloom and doom and everything's horrible, then there's a certain sexiness to that as well, that you just can't sell it when you're an old geezer like me. And that's a huge difference, and most people, why would they walk around saying, oh, I'm a Lovecraft purist and I sense his cosmicism and all these kind of things. I think they won't do it. But it doesn't take when you sit down in the early hours of the morning and you ponder about the vastness of space and your place in it, then kind of creeps up upon you. And you, wow, it's just, I'm not even sure I should say wow, it's just, it scares me a little. It's this vast void emptiness. And here I am. What am I doing exactly? I'm trying to prepare to go grocery shopping tomorrow.
What am I doing with my life? I'm going grocery shopping instead of thinking about this all the time.
Yeah, no.
And I brought this up on the show before, so you guys will have to forgive me. But one of my favorite TV shows is a show called Angel. It's a spinoff of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Long story short,
I have heard you say that.
Yes. Oh, thanks. Well, long story short, in the second season, Angel has an epiphany of sorts. And he's talking with a friend, and he realizes basically what we're talking about, that everything is futile, there is no great reward, nothing out there is looking out for us, and nothing matters. And his friend says, yeah, I'm paraphrasing what he said, and his friend says, well, you seem kind of chipper about that. And he said, well, I guess I finally worked it out. Because if nothing we do matters, and it doesn't in the long run, if nothing we do matters, he says, then all that matters is what we do today, right now. If everything is futile, then the smallest act of kindness is the greatest thing in the world. Because, and in my words, we're all in this ship together.
Yeah, but
Sure.
isn't this a lot like Thoreau living in a hut by the side of the river, the side of the lake, thinking about the universe and what it means to be a natural human being. But at the same time, his mom and his sister are making sure that he's fed and they're
Right.
doing his laundry.
Yeah, yeah. There is some
it's
hypocrisy there.
yeah, just yeah, it's a real interesting idea, Thoreau. But yeah, you're not selling it. You can't separate yourself so much from society.
Well, I don't think his point was to separate himself from society forever. It was just to go out there for what was it, a year, and think about things, and then come back because he didn't live at Walden Pond all his life.
No,
it wasn't. It wasn't that long.
But if you're going to commit to it, commit to it. It's like you don't send your sister out to do your laundry, for God's sake.
I think his main point was that I pulled up some of my favorite Thoreau quotes here, if I can find the right one. Yeah, here it is. This is the only way, we say, but there are as many ways as there can be drawn radii from one center. In other words, he's trying to say that there's just not just one way to live. So, yeah, I don't think he was advocating everyone be like me. I think he was thinking that you don't have to work sun up to sundown only. Try and fix your life to, he said simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Try and fix your life so that you do have to take care of the necessities of life and not be a bum, but at the same time give yourself time to think about these things. You only get one life, live it the way that you want to live it. So, anyway, Yen, would you agree with or disagree with me on any of that?
Well, I mean, it's a little difficult to comment on, but I would say I spend a lot of my time as a philosopher pondering about what is the good human life, and I think you can push the everything's relative kind of scenario, but it won't take you very far because there will be conflicts. And you also have to consider that, well, as much as you like to think that you are a free entity, as the existentialists would probably push it, you are a mammal of sorts. And most people, especially young people, spend a lot of time pondering who they are. And that's great. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. What they fail to do usually is to also ponder what they are. And what you are usually have a huge impact on who you are. And most of the things people, struggle with understanding is their, animal impulses and how to deal with them. But at the same time, it also frames you a little, and there could be freedom in that, because you don't have to eternally ponder about, what is the meaning for a creature like me? Well, you are a very particular creature, and like Pete said earlier, we are dependent on our surroundings. I mean, all the things I know, I learned from someone else. It's not something I cooked up alone on an island somewhere. I stand on the shoulders of giants, if you will, and that goes to everything I do. And I spend a lot of my time now giving these things away. Say, one of the beings in my life is my daughter, and I spend a lot of time, teaching her stuff and helping her to think clearly. And how do you wish to live your life? But that's something. It's not relativism. I'm trying to help you think about how to live a good life. What does it take? And yes, there are some bare necessities that you need, but then you have to also look very carefully at what you value and why you do that. If you don't have a why, you are powerless, and there is no argument. You may have some feelings, or you may have an idea, but you have to have a why. Otherwise, you won't get very far. And I think if you tell yourself, well, whatever I do in life, it has to contribute to me living a good life, then you have actually made some progress. you have philosophically moved forward, and you have distanced yourself from yourself as a perhaps a child. So that movement is a sort of counter movement to relativism, that do whatever you want. No, you can't do whatever you want. You can probably do most of the things you want, but there will be people who would stand in your way if you want to do anything that you can possibly think of.
Right.
And I think that's very important, because it's so easy to say do whatever you wish to do.
Well, it's in the very title of your book, Balanced Wonder.
Correct.
There has to be a balance.
And that's interesting, because I'm looking at, if you look at Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, you see characters encountering the Dark Wonder and just completely failing to comprehend it.
Yes.
But then, as a counterpoint, you go to the Shadow over Innsmouth, and the story ends with, I think, a very transhuman kind of position that says, I've embraced this thing that I hated and feared, and now I will dwell in wondering glory forever.
Correct. Yeah.
And that is two different takes. And if we take that same idea and we go back in Lovecraft's writing and say at the facts in the case of Arthur German, where he finds out that he's not human and the right thing to do is set fire to yourself,
sure,
as opposed to embracing it, those are three very different ways of encountering and resulting from that dark wonder.
And what makes a person react one way as opposed to the other way,
But this also might be evidence of growth in Lovecraft's writing and his own ideas about the world he was living in. When you encounter something that is horrific about yourself, do you burn yourself to death? Do you go mad? Or do you embrace it and explore it? And those are three very different ways to attack the problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think when it comes to our lives as such, none of us are going to turn into deep ones or monkeys as such, but we are going to stay human and until the end.
I agree with you on the surface, but 50 years ago, the technology that we have today would have been wondrous.
Sure, but it doesn't change your nature. Lovecraft here, you spoke about transhumanism. They are not humans at the end. That changes the game. So like a good life for a cow is not the same as a good life for a human being. A good life for a shark is not the same as a good life for a box jelly.
I'm just wondering, because we have now access to so much information.
Mm-hmm. But about what? About
mostly
how to
about cats. Mostly about cats. But we're certainly more connected than we used to be, and
sure,
we're right there on the verge of sort of an event.
But again, there is one possible, and it depends on who you talk to how likely this is. Becoming not human in the future because of technology.
Sure.
You're less and less human because of
not
that.
Quite there yet.
No, we're not anywhere near there, but it may happen at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's splitting hairs, of course. So
no, I totally agree. But for me, what is important to point out? You mentioned Angel earlier.
Yes.
There's a huge difference between Angel and someone like you and me. Why? He's a vampire. He's immortal. Mm-hmm. You and I, we have limited time, whether we like it or not. If you were to change that somehow, say, I grant you eternal life, here's the Holy Grail, drink from it, and you will live forever. then I think philosophically you could argue that, well, you are now so different that you are not really qualifying as being a human being anymore.
I would agree with that, and it's very funny you say that, because just the other day I was out walking and I was thinking about one of my favorite movies, The Man from Earth. Yeah, you went, get out of my brain, Pete. The Man from Earth, and he's saying goodbye to some friends, and don't watch the sequel. By the way, it's complete crap. But this movie is very good, and he poses a hypothetical to them about a man who, through some kind of quirk or glitch or whatever, is 40,000 years old, and has lived since that time and is still living now. And then he starts saying it's him, and it struck me how he said he would leave if he had a family, if he had friends, didn't matter what it was. Every 10 years he would leave. And it didn't matter if he had a child. He just didn't want to be discovered because he wasn't aging. And yeah, he's a bit off the human scale then, I would think. What you just said, I totally agree with. The immortality changes him.
Yeah, it depends on how we define what it is being human. But I think our mortality is definitely, if I were to meet an immortal, I wouldn't know how to address that person. It's like you're just so very different from me. Everything changes if you have unlimited time. But of course, you run into another problem, which is a problem of identity. And memory. I have lived so long now that I don't really remember my first girlfriend anymore. And can you imagine living for 500 years?
Rick, who was the girl that became immortal in Doctor Who?
I was just thinking that.
Yes. What was her name?
I think she took the name She after a while.
Yeah. So, long story short, something the Doctor did made her immortal. But she's still a human as far as how much memory she can store in her brain. So she loses the memory of her years as she goes on. So she keeps these really extensive diaries. And so
she even forgot her own name.
Yes, she forgot who Clara was, but, for example, and when she meets Clara, she says, oh, you're Clara, and Clara's like, oh, you remember me? She goes, no, I read about you in my diary. So
the big question is here, have you died then?
Yes.
Many times already, because that is what I would claim. There is simply no point to going on living for so long if you do not remember anything, or if you have no continuum of memories, then you have died.
And then you get into even if you're not immortal, you get into the question of, are you really the same person you were when you were 10 or 20 or 30? Again, referencing Doctor Who, since I'm such a nerd, he said to Clara, speaking of humans, he goes, he goes through these, he dies and then he is reborn in another body. But he says to Clara, speaking of humans, we all change when you think about it. We're all different people all through our lives, and that's okay. That's good. You got to keep moving as long as you remember all the people that you used to be. And sometimes it's very hard to do.
Absolutely. But there is a sense of accountability here, that there is a something, an identity that continues over time, even though you change slightly. I am, thank heaven, not the same person I was when I was 20, and I'm very grateful for that. Yeah. And if I was, then oh gosh, I wouldn't be very proud today, to be perfectly honest. And I think most people go through that, that they think themselves quite awesome when they're young, and then 20 years later you think, dear God, what did I do?
I love the saying that young men think that old men are fools, but old men know that young men are fools.
Well, I just want to say sometimes you can have the opposite problem, is memory. Like I can remember things that go way back in high school. And I can remember books that I read in my 20s, but I can't remember that horror novel I read 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you guys,
And it can be scary. Yeah.
I cannot remember birth dates.
No, I'm the same. I
Doesn't
don't
matter.
even remember my own anymore.
No.
Well, Yen, you are so fascinating to talk to, and I'm really glad that you came and spoke with us for a while. Please do email me when that paper is coming out, and we'll get you
Sure.
back on the show
Sure.
and talk about it. We'll all read it online. Before you go, does anyone else have a comment or question for Yen?
I had a quick question.
Yes, Bridget.
Is there any chance that you might be lecturing in the States anytime?
Oh gosh, I wish. I don't have a particular connection to the States at the moment, besides the publishing house who actually published my book. It's Lexington Books. They are in the U.S. I do like to say that I'm a sort of advisor to a project in Holland called the Wonderful Education Project, and it's led by a chap called Anders Schinkel. And perhaps through that project, we will, and our publications, we might be able to attend certain events in the US in the coming years. But I have simply I have no invitations to go to the US, and I am unfortunately not a very rich man, so I can't just go because I want to. But I would love to come.
There's a conference every year in Orlando, the International Conference on the Fantastic in the Arts.
Oh, nice. Okay, I didn't know that.
And I'm going this year, but there are lecturers from all over the world.
All right. Okay.
You would fit in perfectly.
Excellent. I will. I'll look into that. Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Bridget, if I couldn't give you a more positive answer. But
that's all right.
It's really the topics that move things, I think. And if there is, I mean, there are lots of colleges that teach art and literature, and some of them have courses on, even weird fiction and the fantastic. But it's a long way away from me.
There's no reason. You're the kind of person who I think should have a YouTube channel, and once every couple of weeks or something, you give a lecture on YouTube that people can access. So
I might be able to record one of them that I give, and then we'll put it on and see what happens.
Well, let me know if you do. Thanks for being here, Yen.
Cheers.
I know it is 1:20 in the morning where you are, so you're probably ready to go to bed.
In a few hours, so yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Get some good rest, and I'm sure I'll be talking with you soon.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Fascinating guy.
Definitely.
Yes. That was good.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I always like when people kind of like bring in more of like a deeper conversation with like philosophy and Lovecraft. And I think you mostly hear, with more of an existential kind of focus, but just his bringing wonderment in, I think it was very interesting, everything he had to say.
Yeah, and Kelly hasn't been able to be here for a while, but he likes to say that if one episode of the Lovecraft eZine podcast doesn't really do it for you, the next one will. So, this one will, I think, be interesting to a lot of people and not to some. And next week's will be different. So, I like that. All right. I am very excited about a show called, have you heard about this, guys? Dispatches from Elsewhere. Has anyone heard about this?
I've seen some headlines, but I haven't watched it. Where is it?
It's on AMC. It starts tonight. I hope to God it's like a normal TV show and will be available on Amazon to rent the episode tomorrow.
Is this the Jason Segel thing?
Yes, it is. And
Yes,
Sally.
yes, I saw that trailer. Yes.
Yeah, the trailer starts out with "There is a world beyond this world," and I'm
Sold.
thinking, "Oh my, yeah, I'm sold to that one line." I mean, it's Jason Segel, Sally Field. I mean, that's not the team up I ever imagined, but and those who have seen it early and reviewed it, it's getting a lot of positive reviews. So I am so excited for this. Here's the synopsis. Dispatches from Elsewhere follows a group of ordinary people who stumble onto a puzzle hiding just beyond the veil of everyday life. So, there you go. I don't want to label everything in the world Lovecraftian, but
You will.
sure smacks of it. Uh, anyway, I hope I can watch it tomorrow, along with The Outsider. So, I can watch The Outsider on Mondays. So check out the trailer for Dispatches from Elsewhere. There's a couple of good trailers. Rick, real quick, you just wanted to say you saw a semi-Lovecraftian movie lately called.
It's definitely a mythos movie, even though it doesn't blatantly use names.
Sure.
It was made in 2016. It was at the Lovecraft Film Festival. It's called The Creature Below. It has a diploma with Miskatonic University on it that you see a lot.
Is that the woman?
Yeah, that's the woman.
Okay.
Who goes down into the trench.
I tried to watch 5 minutes of that and I had to turn it off. But I'll try again.
So Rick recommends it and Pete does not.
Well, no, it didn't hit me that night. It wasn't what I was looking for. I went on a haunted house kick, and
now the same people made a movie called The Book of Monsters, which you should avoid, just to show you I'm not discriminating.
Okay.
Then later looked up and they made any other movies. I said, I'll see this. And I watched it all, and I said, oh, that was a waste of 90 minutes. But The Creature Below was well done.
All right, this is interesting. This was published 2 days ago on the Bloody Disgusting website, and the headline is "The Elder Gods Are Coming: The Resurgence of Lovecraftian Horror." You can Google that. I am not going to read the whole thing, but it does reference three things. It references The Color Out of Space, which generally has been very well received, I think. It references Underwater, who the director, for anyone who hasn't seen it, confirmed exactly who the mythos creature was in the movie. And it talks about Sabrina season 3. So my question is, I tried to watch, resurgence of Lovecraftian horror. Yeah, it's been here all the time. Maybe they didn't notice, but they're writing this because it seems to be in film more. So my question regarding Sabrina is this: since the Lovecraftian elements are, I'm told, are in the 3rd season, can I just start there? Because I couldn't make it through the 1st season.
I love the 1st season, and I'm trying to slog through the 2nd season to get through to the 3rd season. So I don't know. I have that same question, Mike.
Okay.
Well, you should watch just from the 2nd season, because it's almost a standalone episode. Dr. Severus's House of Horrors, which has a Lovecraftian episode.
Okay.
It's like it predicts the possible future for all the characters, which doesn't come to pass. So you can watch that by itself in season 2.
Okay.
Season 3, I can't remember. I think it's the 2nd or the 3rd episode where we get the Lovecraftian sea monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's maybe the 2nd episode.
I think it's the 2nd one. Yeah.
Yeah. I still haven't finished season 3, so if you couldn't make it through season 1, Mike, and I was a fan of the first 2 seasons, but I've been stuck in the last 2 episodes of season 3 for weeks because had to
Really?
tap out. So I don't know. I don't know if you're gonna if you can't stand the first season, how you'd fare in season 3.
I'm only interested because of the Lovecraftian elements.
Yeah, fair
And
Uh,
enough.
there's a Ray Bradbury element that you're going to love.
oh, yeah. Well,
Big time.
Yes,
okay.
I would agree with that. Yeah, there's a big something wicked vibe to that season.
Okay, maybe I should do that. Uh,
It borrows from Ray Bradbury, Arthur Machen, Robert W. Chambers as a little nod, and whoever wrote The Circus of Dr. Lau,
Vinny.
Vinny.
Geez, maybe I should watch it. A little bit of housekeeping. I'm coming off being sick with the flu. I just coughed a couple minutes ago, and I know you guys didn't hear it, but I'm wondering if the audience heard it. So maybe you guys could comment for me. I'm trying to find the correct mute button for this show. Color Out of Space.
I've been trying to find the correct mute button for this show for a long time.
Well, I did lob up that softball, didn't I?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Has everybody seen Color Out of Space but me?
You
I
haven't,
haven't
seen it yet?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
We watched it on eZine movie night last night from Matt. So it was really interesting. I have to say I still think I'm a fan of Defarge. But Nicolas Cage was a little overly Nicolas Cage. But that being said, I think the direction was great. I loved the color Out of Space, and just how the original story is more an outsider seeing what happens, and the movie very much is from the inside of the family seeing what happens. And that was a cool take on it, I thought.
Yeah, the original story is sort of like a second, even third-hand version.
Yeah.
This is now, an internal story. Everybody's, yeah.
It made you care for the family. And I would say Defarge is better, I agree. It was written in that regard. But it also, I think the Wiccan angle was necessary because they want to suggest that she may have caused the meteorite to land in their land.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't really get that. I kind of thought like all of the stuff she did, it was like pointless and didn't matter. Like that's kind of what I got out of it. But I guess it was either pointless or like it definitely didn't help what she was doing. It might have made things worse. Like I couldn't tell where he was going with that. As far as
I think they want to keep it ambiguous.
I think he did, but it was kind of almost like it definitely didn't show any benefits.
I think it was maybe just an Easter egg for Dunwich Horror.
Yeah, like having Lavinia. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Well, if he's going to make the Dunwich Horror and another movie, he's going to want to bring in the witchcraft angle more.
Yeah.
I've been on a real Richard Stanley kick after watching this movie because I'm not a huge movie buff and I've never actually heard of him before, but since then I've like listened to multiple interviews with him. I actually just watched Lost Soul, which is the failed making of The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is like pretty much the last thing he did before this, and that was a total failure. He's like such an interesting character.
Oh yeah, I've met him.
Yeah.
You've met him? Oh, because he was at Necronomicon. My friend told me he was at Necronomicon this past summer, right? Like, I think he was
I met him a couple years before that.
Okay.
Talked to him for a bit. Yeah, I was at Portland. You're right, Pete.
Oh, okay.
What about Dust Devil? I keep hearing about Dust Devil. Is that the title?
Yeah, there's Dust Devil and Hardware, and I have not seen either of those, but it's on my list. But then he also did a Lovecraftian story in the Theater Bazaar, which was like a movie that had 6 short stories, and his was one that was based on a Clark Ashton Smith tale, and it was called The Mother of Toads. And it was actually him and the co-writer of Color Out of Space, which is, I can't remember her name. It's the other author on that. So
one question, you said something about the in Color Out of Space, Cage being overly Cage. Is that possible? How does that work?
Knock knock.
Well, they were just, I know they were trying to show his madness, and I can't remember who mentioned it in a post I was reading, so I apologize. But they were talking about how his father was one of his, or becoming his father was one of his greatest fears, and then as he went mad, he took on some of the mannerisms of his father, and it was like an over accent, like a really weird accent, and kind of impersonating his father and becoming that abusive character. And when I read that, I was like, okay, well that makes sense, but still, it was just put Nicolas Cage in a room and just let him go for it, and he's going mad anyway. So yeah, I couldn't take it seriously in a couple points because I was just laughing at his really weird accent, but which is sad because that point of him, becoming his father is actually a pretty deep point, but I couldn't.
That explains a lot.
Speaking of weird accents, can you hear me?
Oh my
Yeah.
God!
Oh wow!
Hey, it's Kat. You're talking to us on the
It
phone,
is.
huh?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a weird in-between connection. And I'm actually trying to hand you over to the Yellow Highness himself if it's still awake. There you go. Say something. Just say something.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi,
Joe
Joe.
Pulver.
Hi.
How are you,
How's
buddy?
everybody? Oh, so.
You're up late.
Mm-hmm.
How
I
you?
saw you guys were still on and thought I'd say hi.
Well, I'm glad you did. How are you feeling?
Right now, not so great. But, like I said, I was checking to see if you guys were still on. And I saw you were, so I thought I'd say hi.
Well, we miss you a lot, buddy.
I'll be back as soon as I can.
I know.
Thanks.
All right.
I miss you guys too.
All right. Get some rest, okay?
I am.
All right. I'll talk to you
promise
soon,
he's
Joe.
behaving. All right, I'm going to sneak out of here for a few minutes. Anything you want to let the guys know before we... All right.
No, I think we're good.
Oh, give me a sec. Yeah, it's the wild internet around here. The TV is online, and my laptop and the phone, and I'm hearing the chat from three sides or from nowhere.
Well, tell Joe, and maybe you can see this, Kat, but in the live chat, everybody just went crazy that Joe came on for a minute. So a lot of people miss you, Joe, if you can still hear me. So, or tell him. So,
I will let him know.
Yeah.
You know that they have a live chat, Beastie, via YouTube?
Sorry?
This thing just more or less exploded because you were on.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to move the medication in a way that this is going for 2 a.m. here. It's really late for everyone, and I'm trying to move the medication in a way that he's awake from at least midnight to 1-ish, and it worked this time around. But my caller side took care of me not being able to use his computer decently, and by the time I was finally online, he was out. So I'm sorry, my bad, but we're working on it.
No problem. We're just glad to hear from you. And Ben setting up this phone thing is really nice because that's
I
what he's
could
doing.
say that I have a lot of words for them, and none is fit for the chat. So yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
All right, no, it's perfect. All right, I'm going to switch out again. Thanks for giving us a few minutes, and I promise I'm trying to get him online as soon as I can again.
I know you are, and I know you're going through a lot too. Thanks for checking in.
My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the night. All right, bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Kat.
Love ya. Bye.
Man, that was nice.
Aww.
Wow.
I'm trying not to cry.
I just miss that guy so much.
We should talk about Alyssa's visit to the Mothman Museum.
Oh, my visit to the Mothman Museum. Well, I wanted to say before we get to that, I wanted to say to Bridget, there's a lot of reviews. I think people are on the Nicolas Cage like pro or like for him or against him. But a lot of people put in reviews like, why did he change his accent? Like, why was he doing that? It didn't make any sense. But your explanation, I didn't even realize that he was like turning into his dad. So that makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of people are like, he just started having crazy accents for no reason.
Yeah.
And like, there you go. There was a reason.
So I've witnessed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my father used to go through some of the same kind of things where he would just start raging and change his accent to talk more like his father. And it's sort of like, and honestly, through the movie, I'm like, okay, you know what? When he's sitting there going, he has finally lost it. He is not. Well, I think what it's showing is that he's not really the person that we think he is. That he is carefully managing a shell personality that is a family man who loves his wife and his kids. And then when things start to fall apart, that personality doesn't work for him anymore. And he falls back to that thing that's underneath that he's been trying to keep under control. And he loses it. And he loses it big time.
That's scary.
Yeah.
And
that's a good explanation. Yeah.
And I think one of the big things that shows that is that he cries when he kills his alpacas.
Yeah.
But he laughs when he kills his wife.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because when he has to kill the alpacas, that's his failure.
Mm-hmm.
And when he has to kill his wife, that's hers. And maybe I just read too much into that, but
I think that's pretty on point.
Yeah.
This is him trying to deal with the fact that everything that he's tried to cultivate is falling apart. And now he doesn't have any reason to hide that personality anymore. Anyway, that's how I see it.
So tell us about the Mothman, Melissa.
Okay, so
I just bought that book, incidentally. I've never read it.
I love the movie. I watched the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, like many years ago, and I've always wanted to go to West Virginia and see the Mothman Museum. And they have actually a festival every year in September where I guess many people come down and they go to, they just have a Mothman festival. So it was really interesting. So myself and my family, we went down there. We stayed at the Low Hotel, which is right across the street from the Mothman Museum. And it's actually purported to be haunted. The hotel's about 100 years old. There's 3 floors, and it's completely not renovated. It's just like it was 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So we stayed there. It was interesting. Like I'll just say, it kind of had a real Innsmouth feel to it. Like they had literally like the old-fashioned keys and everything like that. I did not have any paranormal experiences, but I definitely had like a creepy feeling when I was there. And then as far as the Mothman Museum, it's small but very interesting. They just have a lot of paraphernalia. They have a lot of authentic newspaper clippings from the actual time when there were the Mothman sightings. They have a lot of props from the movies. They have pictures. And I guess during that time, there's a lot of Men in Black sightings. So they had a lot of, they just had a lot of articles about that, including, I wasn't prepared to talk about this. Or I would have thought of this. I guess I should have been prepared when I messaged you guys that, I went to see the Mothman. But there was this one very odd diary of this guy who I guess had some Man in Black or alien type creature that became his friend. Like it was a friend with him and his wife, and they like had like long conversations, and he was like, I'm just like you, I'm just an alien. And it was really odd, and I don't really know what it had to do with the Mothman, but it was just an interesting diary to read, I guess.
Did you drive across the bridge?
You know what, the bridge no, that bridge is the bridge fell. They did do a new bridge, but I did not drive across that. We did not go to Ohio. No.
Well, I just got the book from Audible.
Really?
I haven't started it yet, but have you read it?
No, I just watched the movie. I want to read the book though.
The book's got a lot. I started it. It's got a lot. It's way different than the movie. Let's just put it that way.
I think the movie really sensationalized a lot of things. And I feel like at that time, I mean, it was like the late '60s. Like, you didn't have the internet or anything like that. So if you might have like someone sees something, and then it's kind of almost creates like a mass like hysteria, or like a mass hallucination. But who knows?
And that book's been around a long time. It was written in published in '75, I believe.
Okay, yeah, it has been around a long time.
Yeah.
So there's another thing is though that town, Point Pleasant, they definitely love the Mothman traffic. Like, there was a little cafe and they sold Mothman cookies.
I'll bet they do. It's probably like Roswell.
Yeah, because it's like a tiny, quiet, quaint little town. There's not much going on there, probably, except for like the Mothman traffic. So they had that big statue right in the middle of the town square, which is very small, like the town square. But it was really, I really liked it. I didn't have any weird sightings, but we did go to the old TNT site, which I can't believe you can just walk around at, because it's like, I think that's where they actually had Mothman sightings. There was like an old government facility where they had they stored TNT, and so the domes are still there, and the domes are like these, I mean, like literally metal domes, and you can just like walk in, and it has such an odd, if you go in, it has such an odd echo, but they're all filled with graffiti and like odd trash. There was like some type of strange, like I don't know if it was like a cow skull like in front of one. Like, it's just very bizarre. I'll post up some pictures of the pictures I took.
On any of the walls, was there graffiti that said "Who watches the Watchman"? Anything like that?
I didn't see anything like that. No. It was just your average like teenage.
No, I'm being
like,
facetious.
Yeah, there wasn't.
Awesome. That sounds like it was a lot of fun.
It was very interesting. I mean, I don't know if I'm very interested in paranormal, cryptozoology. Like, do I believe it? I don't know, but I think it's interesting. It's interesting to like look into and see.
I'm right there too. Yeah.
I love the statue you were photographed next to.
Yeah, the Mothman statue. He's very photogenic.
How big is that?
It's probably life size. I mean, it's about like 7 feet tall. Plus, he's on like a pedestal. Like,
Where's this photo? I must have missed this.
I sent it in the group email.
Oh, okay.
It's if you turn your photos on, you can't miss it.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's like Oh, really?
No, I don't mean it as criticism. I was telling him he can't miss it. It's very noticeable.
Okay.
And I'm glad it caught my eye. I'm just saying. I saw that before I read the text, and I'm going, "What the heck is that?"
Yeah. I think there's a few other pictures that are supposed to be attached. I have a picture. I was just, because I'm new, like here, I just wanted to introduce myself. I also had a picture at Lovecraft's grave during, I think it was Necronomicon 2013, but I think it must not have gone through, but yeah.
Well, a few minutes ago we were talking about dispatches from elsewhere. There's a world beyond this world. That's a mini-series. Now here's something that's on AMC. Here's something coming up on Amazon Prime. I don't know when, but sometime soon. If you can hunt down the trailer on the internet, it should be pretty easy to do. The title of the show is Tales from the Loop.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It looks so interesting. Here's the synopsis. Um, Tales from the Loop explores the town and people who live above, quote, the loop, a machine built to unlock and explore the mysteries of the universe, making things possible that were previously relegated only to science fiction. In this fantastical, mysterious town, poignant human tales are told that bear universal emotional experiences while drawing on the intrigue of genre storytelling. So, I don't know. It looks really interesting to me.
So
I think the guy who created it was one of the main writers on Legion on FX. So I'm very interested.
Matt
to see
Reeves?
No, what's his name? Nathaniel Halpern.
Oh, okay.
okay,
Yeah, he
so,
also wrote on The Killing.
Yeah, he's listed here. You're right. The series was created by Nathaniel Halpern.
no, I love how I love how writers and directors and producers suddenly take credit for things that they really have hijacked from other people.
Okay, I gotta hear this.
So Simon Stalig is an artist, and he began doing these wonderful paintings of kids interacting with giant pieces of technology.
Yeah, they mention him here, Pete. I just skipped over it. The very first part of the synopsis says, from executive producer Matt Reeves and based on the acclaimed art of Swedish artist Simon Stalhag.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look up his art.
Yeah, he's published like I think 3 or 4 volumes of art, and there's a role-playing game.
Wow.
This has been going on, and my kid has been fascinated by this guy for years. He's just an incredible artist, really talented, and I'm really looking forward to see what people are doing with it. But each painting almost tells an entire story. You have kids with power gloves controlling giant mecha.
Some of that is shown in the trailer.
It's really been a long time coming, and I can't wait to see what they've done with his work.
I'm really glad you pointed this out because I want to look up some of his paintings.
Yeah,
and hopefully it'll drive more people to his work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it will.
So hopefully he'll benefit from it as well.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I got a little,
No,
yeah,
not at all.
But I've seen this. It's sort of like, created by this guy, and I'm like, no, it's like you took somebody else's. It's like I think I saw the new season of Altered Carbon is out, and nowhere in the preview they mention all the producers and directors and this and that, and nobody mentions the guy who originally created Altered Carbon.
Yeah.
Really, he's not listed as like a producer.
At least not in the preview I saw.
Oh, not in the trailer. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So they're kind of burying the writer.
Yeah.
That's like when they did that Bates Motel TV series.
Yes.
You got Robert Bloch in small print in the ending credits.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes the creator has to really push. There's a show called Burn Notice, which is not paranormal at all. It's just a fun series about a spy. I think it went 7 seasons. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it.
Yeah, it's set in Miami.
Yeah. First couple of seasons, this doesn't happen. But like beginning with I think it's the 3rd season, at the very end of the beginning credits, it says created by and the guy's name. So he must have muscled his way in here and said, look, this is a success. I want my name on it.
Yeah.
So, Rick, I think I interrupted you. Were you? I'm sorry.
No, I just mentioned Bloch.
Oh, okay. Who else was saying something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I have very limited experience in the TV film world, but there was some talk at one point about doing Cosmology as a TV show, and I also bristled when I saw that they wrote a lovely pilot, but there was sort of this created by credit on the title of that page that was like, that was the writer and director's names, but not mine. So I know exactly what Pete's talking about as far as bristling.
Peter Jackson with the Lord of the Rings movies was very respectful with that. He didn't say Lord of the Rings directed. He wrote. He had the title be J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Each movie.
Yeah. I can remember back when DS9 did their flashback their time travel episode, and they went back to the Trouble with Tribbles, and afterwards, everybody just screamed that David Gerrold did not get a single credit for that original story.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just wrong,
Yeah, he wrote that. And speaking of David Gerrold, he wrote one of the best time travel books ever.
The Man Who Folded Himself.
The Man Who Folded Himself. You are correct, sir.
I know, and it's not because I agree with you, but I've heard it from you like 18,000.
You haven't read it?
No, I have read it.
I'm not saying it's the best. I'm saying it's one of the best.
I actually
it's
prefer.
A very interesting take.
So right here,
my very favorite, Pete, if you have to know, is There Will Be Time by Paul Anderson.
So I keep one really good book by every author I've met, and this is the one I keep by David Gerrold, Chess with a Dragon.
Oh, okay.
Which is about humanity goes out into space, and they encounter an alien species that greatly resembles dragons, and they have to negotiate very carefully because humans are tasty and good with ketchup.
Excuse me, that's funny. Here's a headline for you. This is also bloody disgusting. The Invisible Man is a huge hit for Universal Pictures, which means more monster movies. The article goes on to say that Tom Cruise's Universal monster movie was a piece of crap, and so they're sort of rebooting from here, possibly.
Yeah. So I guess like the original, the Benicio del Toro Wolfman movie was passable.
Passable, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Tom Cruise movie, The Mummy remake, was just horrendous and tanked their attempt to kickstart their dark universe.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't Dracula Untold also part of that
series
of failed universe building kind of? Yeah.
And so now they think they're going to try again. This time it's going to be called Dark Army.
Dark Army.
Dark Army.
What the? Okay.
I don't need the Universal monsters to be like the Avengers. I'm fine. Just gotta do
and it actually says that in the article, Sean. It talks about how Marvel introduced us to this shared universe stuff. So therefore, we've all got to do it. No.
Universal was one of the first to do a shared universe.
Yeah, but they haven't done it lately.
No.
And they never made them into an army. I want to point that out.
They didn't plan it as a shared universe.
Yeah.
So if a movie tanked, they didn't work it in. Like The Werewolf of London was forgotten.
Right.
Until they had the success of The Wolfman.
I like Werewolf of London. That was a good one.
We had Daniel Krauss on, who posthumously wrote The Living Dead with George Romero. So that leads into this. There's a headline. This is Dread Central. Day of the Dead series coming to Sci-Fi in 2021. I don't know what to think of this, quite honestly.
Well, so I read that article, and it goes on to say, it's like in the first hours of the zombie apocalypse. But Day of the Dead is actually set during the last parts of the zombie apocalypse.
I don't know.
Well, you've already had the Walking Dead TV series. How many zombie TV series do you need?
Well, yeah. And then Z Nation, and now we have V Wars.
Yeah, like I asked Daniel, what if somebody came up to you and says, "This looks good. It's George Romero, obviously, and you, but Christ, I'm so sick of zombies." And
Right.
he had such a great answer that this was the capstone from the guy who started it all, in so
Yeah.
At least the Evil Dead was a variation on zombies.
yeah, that's true.
A friend of mine, Adam Troy Castro, went on a bit of a rant on this and basically came down on the idea that zombie films aren't about the big bad in the zombie films aren't zombies. It's men trying to deal with other people who they would normally just walk away from, but are now forced to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that zombies aren't evil. They're animals and they want to eat.
Right.
No.
You're just in the, and you could say it was the Attack of the Killer Shrews or the Triffids or whatever. It's forcing you to deal with people that you would not want to deal with, but you have to.
Yeah.
And they are going to royally screw you.
So this series, I think, would have to be damn good. I mean, damn good, and bring something new for it to succeed. So
Yeah.
I don't know. If they think that putting Romero's name on it is going to make it an automatic hit, they're mistaken.
And Max Brooks's new book coming out in May, I think, is going to be a Bigfoot massacre book. So
really,
we may see a slew of Bigfoot movies coming out in the next couple of years.
Well, so I was on Prime the other day. There's like 3,000 Bigfoot movies.
There are, yeah. I
But
think
tons are
Bobcat
good.
Goldthwait's movie that he did, I forget what the name of it is. It was actually not bad.
My kids really enjoyed the last book Max Brooks did.
Okay, this is not about Bigfoot, but you made me think of it when you said that, Rich. You guys should look up, if you don't already know about him, a guy by the name of David Paulides. I believe it's Paulides. There's some interviews with him on YouTube, and he used to be a cop, and he documents all these people who go missing, just suddenly missing.
Yeah. This is the 411.
Yes, Missing
Series?
411.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Missing 411. It's really fascinating, and like I said to Jen, it's okay to say you don't know, but some of this stuff is pretty hard to dismiss.
Yeah, it is really. I watched both. There's a part one and there's a second one.
I haven't seen the
Years
movies.
later.
I've just listened to his interviews. Is the movie worth watching?
They are. It's two documentaries. One's about from 3 years ago, and the most recent one I think is from last year. One deals.
And
the
it's
first
called
one deals
Missing
with
411,
kids.
isn't it?
It is. The first one deals with kids.
Okay.
The second one deals with hunters going missing, and it's all centered around wooded areas like national park areas, and there are all these clusters of disappearances that he doesn't say any of them are explicitly paranormal, but he brings up the anomaly that these things are really hard to explain, given the circumstances of the disappearances, especially for human hunters who know the wilderness. They're armed, that kind of thing. So it is really interesting.
Here's something I read several years ago along this line. I'm glad I could look it up quickly. It's in the Huffington Post regarding Missing 411. This article is from September 2013. Starts off talking about his latest book in his Missing 411 series, North America and Beyond. And here I'll read this paragraph. The horror in the book is how quickly some people go missing. They are there 1 minute and gone the next. And when family or friends quickly try to locate the person in the immediate vicinity, they are nowhere to be found. Being last in line, often the person disappearing, is another common element, which that's pretty creepy. For those who go missing, meeting Paulides' criteria and are found, you will read that they either cannot say what happened to them or have a foggy memory of what happened. And anyone who's interested in this, just Google "Never Be the Last in Line," maybe Huffington Post, or, along with that, or Pilates, Piaulids. Yeah, that's right. It's fascinating. You can really get lost in this stuff because there's so much of it, and because so much of this paranormal crap is pretty easy to dismiss, you know. But this is something that's not quite so easy to dismiss, from what I've seen. And thanks for the recommendation, Rich, because I've listened to a lot of these interviews, but I haven't watched the movie yet. It was out like, yeah, I think you said a year ago, something like that. So I know it's available to rent on Amazon.
So, Mike, have you met Dave Godsworth?
Rings a bell.
Right.
Who is he?
He writes some mythos fiction. He's an H.P. Lovecraft scholar.
Okay. I may have met him at a convention.
Yeah, and his brother is a writer too, Scott Godsworth. Anyway, Dave for the last 2 years has been bending my ear like once a week on marine biology issues, and it's finally coming out. His book will be a sea serpent territory book, and he's debunking sea serpent sightings around Florida for the last 200 years.
There's sea serpent sightings in Florida?
Yeah. Well, no, there aren't. That's his point.
I've never even heard that people thought there were.
Oh yeah, we have there's the muck monster, and there in St. Augustine there was a globster.
Do you think it could be? I mean, much like yourself, a lot of people in Florida are up in years, and can't be.
Wow.
Jesus.
Little Nile,
You just, I was just, having a conversation, and you just took the knife and,
I'm just offering a possible alternative hypothesis. That's all.
Yes. Well, Dave has worked very, very hard.
So he's put more work into it than I just did.
Yes. He's worked very, very hard to try and go through records, and he's found some, he's gone to books and say, oh look, there was a sea serpent sighting in Florida here, and he'll get the little blurb that they wrote about it, and he'll find it. And it's like it was originally in Spain 30 years earlier, and this has nothing to do with Florida. It's just yellow journalism, and just he's done a lot of work, and I think it's going to be an interesting volume.
Speaking of all this sense of wonder and exploring possible paranormal things, I think it started with me. My mom would go to places like DAV and Salvation Army a lot to get clothes. And back in those days, they would have some books in the back, to sell. And one day, I was I don't know, 10 years old, something like that. I ran across a book called Stranger Than Science. And it was written in the 50s, I think. Here I am reading it in the low 1980s. And it just fascinated me. And as an adult, I got another copy of the book, and a lot of this stuff you read it as an adult, and you're like it, and you can research on the web, and it's easily dismissible. But that's what kind of jump started it,
Mm-hmm.
So
I had a book. I think my mom had. It was almost like an encyclopedia. It was like the Book of Unsolved Mysteries, and it just had everything, just different poltergeists, like the Loch Ness monster. Spontaneous combustion, just any weird.
Well, that's
phenomenon. Yeah, well, yeah, but it's odd. And when was the last time you heard about it happen? I guess it used to happen, but I don't.
Charles Dickens thought it happened.
Yeah, really.
every time somebody brings up unsolved mysteries, it's locked in my brain. I think about Fox Mulder and Scully being on The Simpsons. What, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and David Duchovny kind of making fun of his character, And he's like FBI, and there's a picture of him in a swimsuit, and he goes on about all the mysteries of the world, and he's like, and the unsolved mysteries of unsolved mysteries.
Well, I would like to comment, well, we could investigate a kidnapping or a UFO sighting. Let's go for the UFO sighting.
Exactly.
Yeah, Melissa, that sounds like a series that my mom had when I was, in the late 70s, early 80s, called Out of This World.
Okay.
It was a Time Life series,
I
and
think
it
it's
had
Time Life,
articles, and it had all those articles, and there was a spontaneous combustion. There were all sorts of articles on, vampires or ghosts or poltergeists or all sorts of. Each month you got a new book, and the hardcover book was filled with different articles about different things. I think there were like 20 volumes.
This is before the internet, so it was like, an encyclopedia. I'm just going to read this for fun. It's weird stuff. So, but yeah, it's fast. You're just like, wow, this how could this happen? I guess that does go to your sense of wonder too. You're like, look at all this strange stuff in the world.
Yeah.
Let's take it back to Charles Dickens. It's in his book Bleak House that the character died of spontaneous combustion.
Wait, what book?
Bleak House.
Okay.
And it happens as if it's normally accepted. It isn't like, what the heck, it isn't like people go, what the heck did happen? He only died of spontaneous combustion. Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
How was it? Wow.
One of the stories that really stuck with me all these years from Stranger Than Science, and I was so disillusioned as an adult to find out it was complete and utter crap. But it's about this family guy lived on a farm. This is like 1860 or something like that. And his family's approaching, they're coming in from town or something like that. And he waves at him, and all of a sudden he disappears. And it's just a regular field. There's no caves around, anything like that. And he's gone. Nobody, in the extensive searches, nobody can find him. And then the kids are at that spot months later, and they hear him crying for help until his voice fades away forever. And, well, it didn't happen. But it's a good story, So.
Wow. Yeah.
Couple more things, I guess. Well, let me just say thank you to Leslie Lutz for sending me an advanced review copy of this book, Fractured Tide. It looks very interesting. Look it up on Amazon. Again, Fractured Tide, and the last name is Lutz, Lutz, and we're going to get her on the show this summer, I think. Next week, we're going to talk with Eddie Generous about his book, Plantation Pan, which is a cosmic horror and science fiction sequel to Arthur Macken's masterpiece, The Great God Pan. So,
what's the name of the book again?
Plantation Pan, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's available on Amazon right now, and there's a pretty cheap Kindle version. So, maybe if somebody could confirm that for me. Pete, what are you holding up? Sorry, Rick, what?
I want to know what Pete was holding up.
Yeah.
Cromwell Stone, which is something you had sent to me, Rick, or Mike.
I did?
Yeah, by Titan Books.
Oh, okay.
You asked if somebody would read this and review it?
That's right. That explains why I haven't seen it. I told them to send it directly to you.
Right. So I finished it twice. I'm going to read it a third time, and I'll write you something about it.
Yeah, please do.
I guess you liked it.
It's interesting.
Okay.
Artwork style is very reminiscent of Bernie Wrightson in its complexity and detail.
Wow.
But if you can see, it's not a forest, it's a city. So, really detailed work.
I saw an interesting Kickstarter for Lovecraftian statues that are well sculpted, but you create them on a 3D printer.
Right. Yes.
How does 3D printers work?
It's magic as far as my brain is concerned.
I mean, how good is the?
It's like teleportation, man.
How good is the product that comes out of there?
I've seen some great products come out of 3D printers.
Yeah,
They've sent
really good stuff.
3D tools to the space station.
Yeah.
It really just depends on what it's made out of. If it's made out of resin or
these statues are fat. These statues are something that would go for like $100 if it was made out of real
right
sculpture.
Yeah, 3D printing is. I think it's just amazing.
Meanwhile, on
back
that
at the ranch,
building off of Rick, Steve Hickman is redesigning and re-releasing his Cthulhu statue. It looks very similar to the one that I bought in the 80s, but it has more detail. And, $250.
Whoa.
Considering that the original one he did now goes for $500 or $1,000.
Okay, yeah, this is cheaper.
This is cheaper, but
well, if you want quality, you're going to pay for quality. It's like what I was talking about with Bridget's Lovecraftian music box.
Yeah,
that's a thing of beauty, and it's like Centipede Press. You either want a Centipede Press book that's a work of art, or you don't. So, or you want it and can't afford it. So, I'm sorry, Bridget. Were you going to say something?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Now, speaking of a bunch of crap that probably isn't true, I want to say thank you to Seth Bradley for sending me this 40 in Times from, I think it's August 2018, and it's a H.P. Lovecraft issue. So it's neat because I don't get the 40 in Times, and now I can read this. So thank you very much, Seth. And a really special thanks to David Del Cole, who sent me one hell of a care package. Here's one of the things he sent me. Here's Edgar Allan Poe. He sent me the 1939 Batman, which I'm a sentimental sap, David. I gave it to my son right away, and he loved it. So it's on his many shelves. He's got the Joker and Batmans and things like that. So thank you very much. David sent me some Star Trek books. He also sent me, Pete, you can start drooling if you'd like, this Richard Matheson noir book. Now you're going to tell me you have it, aren't you? You're muted. You're muted. I can speak for you if you'd like.
I do not have that.
You don't have that? Look at this. Look at it.
I see it.
I'm displaying it prominently here for you, so you can see it in the background. And I'll take it out of the plastic and read it too. All right. Anything else, folks? Thank you, David, and thank you, Seth, very much. I really appreciate it.
They are nice guys, and they will go down. I will allow them into heaven because they send me nice stuff.
I was so happy. All this stuff that David sent me, I just kept pulling stuff out, and I was so happy that I did something that I never do, which was get on Facebook Messenger and video call somebody that didn't know I was going to video call them. So I video called David, and he answered because I know he knew why I was calling. So yeah, thanks. Anything else, guys, before we go?
I just give a shout out to there's a podcast called Ain't Slayed Nobody. They only put out one about every month, but it's a Call of Cthulhu RPG. So if you enjoy listening to people play tabletop games, it's pretty funny.
What's the name of the podcast again?
Ain't Slayed Nobody.
Ain't Slayed Nobody. AINT?
Yep.
Okay. Ain't Slayed Nobody. All right. Well, that should be easy to Google.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty entertaining.
Thanks for letting us know. Eddie Generous, like I said, next we'll discuss this Great God Pan sequel next week, March the 15th. After that, we deliberately have no guest, which we like to do sometimes, which basically means the second hour becomes 2 hours of us babbling on about things. Um,
Oh, oh,
yes.
oh, Mr. Carter. I just remembered. Okay, so
The trick is, William Potter, not minding that it hurts. Okay, go on.
all right. So a bunch of local horror writers in the South Florida area are getting together, and we're calling ourselves Gruesome Brews, and we're going to go to pubs and drink and talk and sell books. So if you are in the Tri-County South Florida area, our first event will be in April 11th. I think we're at Saltwater Brewery, but look for Gruesome Brews on Facebook.
Okay. Sounds cool.
And I will be there. Like, I rarely do stuff in South Florida because, people know me here and don't want to be classified like that.
Stay away from Homestead.
Why?
The invasion thing. Where have you been?
There's an invasion in Homestead?
Yeah, didn't you see the TV show?
Oh, God. I can remember that. The funny thing is that Homestead is like,
it's a real town. I don't know why they didn't choose a different name.
It's not on the water.
No, it's not. It's not by the
ocean. And it's like, wait, what? No.
Pick a different name, Sean Cassidy.
Well, it's sort of like, I can remember. Did you ever watch Silk Stockings on like TNT?
I would really hate to admit to something like that, Pete, but the answer is I have seen some episode of Silk Stockings because this was in the mid-90s, and I was dating my soon-to-be wife at the time, and she was in love with the series.
Yeah, so
and I think the guy, I was successfully got her away from the guy. So
it's set in Palm Beach, which is an island, like literally 3-4 miles away from where I live.
Right, Burn Notice is better, but go on.
In the opening sequence, they're driving along and racing, and then it ends up with them on a cliff overlooking the city. There are no cliffs.
Yeah, I was very surprised to learn in Star Trek, the 2009 movie, I'm from Iowa, as is James T. Kirk, or he will be someday. There's apparently a huge canyon somewhere in Iowa. And I just don't think that's true.
Well, it hasn't opened yet. It'll happen after you.
Oh, man, you got me. Good point, Sean.
It was a result of the eugenic wars, which should have happened 30 years ago.
Damn it.
Who were the big villains in Star Trek Enterprise?
I don't remember.
There was this alliance of, what was it, Rick?
Oh, you mean from the third season? I don't remember who.
Yeah. Anyway, they attacked Earth, and they cut giant holes in Earth, including in Florida.
And apparently in Iowa. Okay.
And in Iowa too.
All right. Well, there goes that. All right. What was I talking about? Yeah, no guest 2 weeks from now. On purpose. I believe I've got another no guest show coming up on the 12th of April. And Daniel Krause was bummed that he couldn't stay longer when he was with us a couple weeks ago. So he thinks he's gonna come back on the 12th and
what?
That's
talk with us. Cool.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. It was Super Bowl day, so he had to go.
Not as cool as you, Sean.
No, not as obviously not.
It's okay. He can be cooler than me. He came up with the idea for Shape of Water, so no big deal.
Yeah, I guess. And I've said this before, but look up his. I don't know if it's quite out yet. His book. Crap! I just forgot the title. The one about where they torture E.T. Remember me talking about that?
Oh, Bent Heavens.
Bent Heavens. Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, that's how he described it to me. But it looks like a really, really good book. So, yeah, Bent Heavens, Daniel Krause, Kraus. All right. Did I miss anything? Thanks, everybody, for being on the show. Again, if you want to know who's coming up, just go to lovecraftezine.com, click on podcast, and scroll down a little bit, and you'll see who's coming up for the next few months. And that's constantly updated. Don't forget the sale that I've got, the book sale that I've got in the show notes. And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you being here.
Night, everybody.
Bye.